So we'll get kicked off here. This talk is ELMS Learning Network, Transforming Educational Technology Design. My name is Brian Olendijk, or at BTOPro on Twitter. So a little bit about me. I work at the College of Arts and Architecture's E-Learning Institute. It's at Penn State. I've been working there since 2007, which, God, it sounds like a really long time now. And I view my job as I'm an instructional technologist, but I kind of view my job as my whole goal is to automate what I'm doing out of what I was doing. I do this about every 3 to 4 months by my current estimates. So just some history of the E-Learning Institute. We were founded in 2007, so I'm one of the original employees. We have a couple projects that have been out in the open. We've won a couple past Innovator Awards here in 2010 and 2011. 2010 for our Open Studio project, which was students being able to comment and submit images back and forth to each other in the context of a classroom. We used Drupal to build that. The second one was ELI Media, which is an asset management system that we use to stream video, embed images in courses, basically eliminate HTML from the picture of instructional designer and faculty's lives, that they kind of upload media, are given a little snippet type of thing, embed snippet, and it turns itself into media. That was also in Drupal, and what I'll show eventually is also Drupal, because that's all we do everything in is Drupal. So agenda for today is kind of who, what, where, the normal usual suspects, as well as a philosophy of design, because part of this is trying to think differently about the way learning management systems are designed. I usually don't refer to what I'm building as a learning management system for various reasons. The word is toxic. But it makes sense nonetheless. So skipping ahead, because this is basically a college classroom lecture hall, and so we've got computers and everybody with phones and things. ELMSLN.org is where all information about the project is kind of somewhat aggregated. And then I post a lot of ramblings about philosophy on my own site, btopro.com. But as for who's currently involved in the project, before we say what the project is, so the Madison, Wisconsin Law School was recently awarded a grant to pilot ELMS Learning Network. Their Center for Patient Partnerships, which is basically 1/4 of the law school because of the way they're set up into these kind of this square formation. They've been using the system for about the last year now. They've got 5 courses. They're going to be adding another 2 courses in the upcoming semester. College of Arts and Architecture has 17 courses running actively in the system we've got about between 30 and 40, it depends on what faculty are offering courses at any given time. So we're slowly transitioning off of older Drupal versions of our system into ELMS Learning Network. So where can I get this? Again, it's just at that website. Usually I talk to developer audiences. Is anyone here a developer? Okay, so a few developers. So what is ELMS? Because I basically skipped that in the first 10 slides, right? So ELMS is basically an umbrella term that says that anything that's produced in pursuit of online courseware can be released open source. So this is an incredibly generic umbrella term that I find myself in and our team. So we basically get to just produce things to deliver courses to students, and then we get to ship all the code back out the door to the Drupal ecosystem and to non-Drupal projects as well. So we like to tagline the system as being designed by instructional designers for instructional designers. But recently I was able to change it to it's also being produced by instructional technologists and students. So we had our first student get a code commit to the system just a week ago, and I'll be hiring 2 more students in the fall. So we're really trying to build this out as a collaborative process to build a next generation learning ecosystem. So as I mentioned, basically anything fits under the ELMS umbrella, so long as it's for our courses. So that can be style guides, that can be code, that can be themes and different designs that we have. As I mentioned, I'm a developer, so I usually go through these slides a lot slower. But we have themes. We've got a full-on style guide, which is basically how to talk about a college's listing of courses. And so that's not actually connected to Drupal or the project in any way, really. It's a standalone work that a vendor went and re-engineered to be open source for us. So I highly recommend checking that out. You can just search for ELMS style guide. It's usually the first result. We've also got full-blown, they're called distributions. So in Drupal, if you take Drupal and you basically package a whole bunch of things together and then give it to someone as more of a product, because Drupal is just a framework, that's known as a distribution. So I actually maintain several distributions as a result of this work. Seeing what some of those look like, we have one called Course Information System. So this is more of a marketing piece where people can come and learn what courses we have, find out about our college and its online offerings. So we've got more of a marketing side, right? So we say, hey, this is Art 10. We actually have this course out on Coursera as well. We've got another platform called MOOC. I don't think MOOCs are done the right way, so I made sure to reserve the namespace so that we could attempt to do it the right way in the Drupal ecosystem. But this is actually, it's a screenshot of one of our courses, and to demonstrate the level of flexibility that using a non-educational platform like Drupal gives you, this is using the exact same framework, right? So this is a completely different looking course. It has different functionality added on top of what MOOC gives you out of the box, but this is what one of the courses, the Center for Patient Partnerships, has been able to put together. And then we're also working towards, this is kind of a sneak peek of our next generation usability. We have a user experience designer who's full-time on the project now, so this is what he's working on. Everything responsive, even responsive typography, so all the type settings in this change so that text is incredibly readable no matter what format or device you're on. We've also got, as I mentioned, ELMS, called it ELI Media, we call it ELMS Media now. Basically that media is uploaded to it and then you're given kind of a little short code that you can copy and paste anywhere and it interprets it into what the media is supposed to be. If you've ever used a WYSIWYG text editor, click edit and just drop text in, you might realize how obnoxious it is to work with object code or Flash code or HTML5 code or whatever the buzzword code is. This eliminates that. And this is just a screenshot that is kind of our system for that. So those are some past things. So what is ELMS Learning Network? First, I like to take a look at what the current LMS situation is. And so we're going to look at the LMS of today, and by that I mean the 90s, because it largely hasn't changed, I hate to say. So we've got a single point of functionality, which usually leads to a single point of success, which oftentimes can also lead to a single point of failure if that's the only place that you work. This is not to the fault of any vendor or any one solution. It's the problem that it is one solution. You have one system that's trying to do too much. If you went and pitched this to a Drupal vendor that builds websites for people, this would never be the functionality of one website. I like to try and think of the LMS as a website because that's really all it is. In EdTech, we try to talk about it like it's something completely different, but it's just a website with the same type of functionality, right? So I try not to, I go into a preachy break mode, but I mean, this really hurts me to see systems that are this big because they're set in motion to fail. I mean, this is a dinosaur way of building out technology. You don't make one giant technology and then just say, oh, we've got new functionality, new functionality, new functionality. Everybody always uses about 2% of the functionality, so stop throwing more functionality into it, right? Nothing is built this way anymore. I don't know why. I have an obsession with dinosaurs. I apologize in advance. And so if we keep moving down this path, this causes instructional technologists to drink, which is not a good thing. So what do faculty and students do, right? Because they're given one big bucket solution. They already do this. They already move out into other solutions or use just the 2% of the LMS that they actually like, usually the gradebook from what I've heard from a lot of people. And whether or not they like that, it's the authorized place to put grades, which trumps a lot of things. So they move out into other technologies, right? They go and use blogging platforms. They go and use Google. They go and use Yammer. Whatever it is, they get the job done. But they're doing so with certain risks, right? So innovation always comes with risks. So there's P2 concerns, personal identifiable information that you're telling students, hey, go put your data over here or put it over here. There's you have potentially multiple logins. If you're telling people to use a Microsoft service for one part of the course and you're telling them to use a Google service for another part and you're telling them to use an internal service or a made-up custom system. There's issues with data retention, security policy, so you could have mixed data retention policies across different parts of the course, which can get a little weird. There's also, from just the IT staff perspective, having to support unknown services. So faculty member pegs their entire destiny of a course on a system that we're not aware of, and then it goes down, or they stop supporting some function that was critical to the course. Now we look silly because we allowed it to go through, or recommended it in some instances. And the number one issue is accessibility. So if you're creating a course and you tell students to complete that course, they have to go to Service X. Service X must maintain the same level of accessibility as every other part of the course, or else you're in legal trouble potentially. If you have someone that needs that website to be screen reader accessible, for example, and they can't get to it, you need to at least have an alternative, but our interpretation from the accessibility office has been it has to be the exact same experience. You can't just make an alternative and say, oh, well, it's not really that important. Because if it's not really that important, it shouldn't be in there. So how is ELMS Learning Network different from all this rambling that I've been doing? So basically, we take the LMS and treat it as a suite of tools, that each of those little crammed into one big bucket bubbles is a standalone system or service. And so the philosophy around the system is that it's not about the next system that you're going to implement. It's the mindset that as long as you exist as a group, you will be implementing systems. That system might be, hey, we got access to Google Docs because now we're a Google University. That's still a system implementation. There still has to be directions created. There has to be everybody got on board to go there. And we're going to be doing this every few years, right? We all keep coming back to this conference and other technology conferences, looking at the next product. This is a cycle that keeps going on over and over again. And so I'm doing this, and our group is doing this via Drupal. So this is kind of what our suite of tools currently looks like in the way that we split out functionality of an LMS across multiple platforms. So we've got kind of our logistics and marketing of a course outside of the LMS, right? Because another issue with LMS is typically it's a closed loop system. You need to have an account to get into it. So already you can't really, you have to build a site to promote the fact that you have courses. MOOC is our content outlining tool, so that's kind of the instructional flow of the course that we pass people through, and then we basically hook all these other systems into that. So that's kind of the main course experience. CLE stands for Collaborative Learning Environment. That's a modification of the system that we won the award for in 2010. So basically students can submit things there, they can get rubric-based feedback. We're working on some HTML5, click the button and record audio feedback widgets, and it rips straight to MP3 for the students, pretty cool. Blogs, I don't need to go over what blogs are. ELMS Media, which is our asset management, so we keep our assets separate from the course content outline as well, because that way we can also upgrade these systems kind of independent of each other, and so there's less dependencies in each one of them. Analytics, we use a tool called Piwik, which if you take nothing else from this, Piwik is a completely open source project of its own. It's not Drupal, it's a standalone. Basically seeks to be a replacement of Google Analytics, which is nice because then you're not shipping student analytical data out the door to Google, even if it is anonymized. And then you can do additional analysis with it that you can't do on Google because you own the data. And then there's some other tools that I won't go over what iCore is. But basically, we've got all of these tools set up to form a network. And so what this looks like with a series of subdomains with what we do is that we basically have everyone initially coming into our course experience, whether they're currently a student or they're maybe looking to be a student, they go to this online.site.com address. So it's kind of, if you think of it as online.the college that's offering a course, that's kind of the way we've got everything positioned. And so then, even further abstracted from online, it's whatever the tool name is, whatever the university or department is, / course. So in the case of Art 10, it would be courses.ana.psu.edu, because that's the unit, / Art 10. And so it's very easy to find every course and every part of a course using this model. So what's a student experience like? Well, now we've got access to all these great single sign-on technologies. So things like Cosign, LDAP, Shibboleth, LTI, tin can, OAuth, all these buzzwords, right? Because like 4 people raise their hands that they're developers. Basically, there's a whole series of buzzwords out there that can make sure that when you click one place, you're automatically logged in when you go to the next place. This is how Twitter and other apps work on your phone. LTI is really big right now amongst LMSs and getting students to be able to basically just launch off to other systems. So we have LTI support built into the system to basically say, okay, well, you click through from your LMS, if you have an older system, because this is again, a philosophy shift. We're trying to use the current LMS that a lot of people already have and start to ship the experience out the door to this ecosystem of tools. So we support LTI, in which you click through, and then basically the system would know, oh, you mean to go over there, and it would take you there. Again, a process that can be complex initially, but then the student experience, they don't care where they're going, right? They've got 12 tabs open, they've got their laptops up like some of you do. They're paying attention to lots of things at the same time already. So our feedback has not been negative, is basically what I'm trying to say. And so what you can do with this is basically use the parts of the overarching system that you want to deliver your course. And so we could have Cool Course 100, but we could have a very different course 200, which just uses 2 of these components, or an old school, just, hey, there's videos dropped in the page, and you click and you go to the next video and the next one, the next one. But this also allows us, because everything is kind of disconnected and broken up, this allows us for 5 years down the road from now to swap out our blogging platform with whatever the new blogging platform is, right? So right now we have a Drupal-based blogging platform, but I'm sure most people know WordPress is extremely popular for blogging. So if WordPress's LTI support at the university and things catch us up, we just drop that into our network and push people over there for that part of the system. So what we're talking about is this technique of network Drupal distributions. So each course forms a small network of systems, and then the system usage is based on the goals of the course, the thing that it should always be, right? You don't just go and get the off-the-shelf and then say, oh, well, you teach math. That's great. You teach English. Cool, use the same system. Right? I mean, immediately, MathML support, why do I need to worry about MathML support if I'm teaching an English course, right? Or in our case, arts courses. I mean, we're partnering with the law school. Our topics are completely different, and we can manipulate the system to meet our needs independent of each other, but still have this conversation in which we're sharing a lot of the same system components. So this is a brand new idea that no one has ever thought of. And we should probably get an award for this. Except that it's not, right? Because you use this every day. So Google, Microsoft, all the big brands use this approach with the way they deploy projects every day. They don't take the same system and mash YouTube into it. They acquire YouTube and then mash into it their integrated login system, right? So you still have one unified account across all these services, and it gets to the point, something like Google Docs. Google Docs is passing your data to tons of different services in the Google network, and you don't even think about it because they've stitched the experience together. But this allows them, whenever interactive spreadsheets that people can manipulate in 3D real time comes out, that's a brand new offering that they then integrate into that product. They don't build up one big product. And so we can do something similar to this, in which we've got lots of different parts of the system and a common unifying brand. So you see, it's terrible on a really large monitor, but basically we have the same course spread across different services that may look different but have a very thin branding that's the same. This is similar to what Google has here. I've taken basically just a screen grab of the top bars, and so the top bar is usually the same or very similar across Google's suite of tools, but then the experience below is completely different. So what we're building out is effectively college-level learning networks. And the idea is that by keeping it at the college level, that gives you enough ability to affect change with the technology, because we're talking open source and the ability to manipulate it, that if this goes into a large centralized deployment, you're not going to get access to modify the 2% of the system anyway, which is another, go into that another time if anyone wanted me to, but basically that we would get this type of a setup for the way that a new university LMS would function, that everyone's working off of the same fundamental technology, but using automation and things. We don't need to have one point that everybody comes to. right? Because if additional load is brought upon our university systems because the law school got a brand new course, why does that impact my arts courses, right? We can all function independent of each other, but using a common framework, still be able to upgrade and innovate at the paces that we feel comfortable. So at this point, I'd like to show a little bit of a demo of some of the things that we've done with this. Close that there. So this is just the home of the project. It links off to a lot of other sites. The project team is fairly small. For several years, it was just me. But now, but I'm leveraging a community that has tens of thousands of developers. And so it's never just me. It's me Googling the right word to get the functionality an instructional designer just asked me for, and then me imagining how that Drupal module or modules could be used together to give them an educational experience. And so it has never been just me, but now it actually isn't just me. We have a user experience designer. We have one student actively involved in the project, and we'll have 2 in the coming weeks. Our partnership with the law school, I just came from there like 5 days ago, so that just kicked off. And so we're starting to work through what it is they're trying to do. The focus is most likely going to be on discussions and building a next generation discussion forum engine. I hate forums, but at least having that as their piece of the network that they're working on and that they can contribute people to. So that's a website that has information about that. We also have a public, I love Trello. If you've never used Trello, it's completely free. I got my whole organization ratcheted on this, but we've got a completely open Trello board that has everything that's being worked on with a project to make it more transparent that there is a lot going on, even with a small team. So some of what the systems look like. So this is our deployment of this system. And so as I mentioned, it's, you know, let me see, can I zoom in? The AV people would be mad, but so it's typically, it's the name of the tool dot whatever the university or department using it is / architecture 100 in this case as the course. And so what that gets us, because we're on the scope of this system, is marketing, front-facing, presentation to students that are prospective, as well as faculty, right? Because faculty love to say like, hey, look at this cool stuff that we're doing. So because this is on the online site, this is, I know just at a glance, that this is the marketing aspect of Architecture 100. And so we've got a sample syllabus, we've got some information about it, we've got a video with our faculty member on the course. We build them up, right? So they've got a little profile on the site. And so we can see the courses that this faculty member's authored. We can assemble a highlight reel of the work that they've done. And so we can also pull together our listing of courses. So this is our current listing of courses that we have out there. Can jump around to, go to like Music 7. I love Steve. And so you can see Steve's bio is built out a little more. We can see Steve has authored 3 courses with us. So he can at a glance kind of give this to someone. It's an informal online CV, if you will, of the work that he's done with the eLearning Institute and the College of Arts and Architecture. And so everything we do is also mobile responsive. So when certain large vendors like Blackboard say that they're focusing on responsive design, I think it's kind of silly because this has been in the CMS world for 5 years now. I mean, mobile first is the way things have been built for a long time, just not ed tech platforms. So we also talk about ourselves in here. So there's a little bit about the team and our extremely stretched pictures because I really need to have better pictures of us in there. So that's more of the marketing side of things. But I'm logged in, so you might notice I have edit tabs and things like that. There's also kind of this hidden logistics layer. So we go from marketing, so we have a conversation, there's a course we're going to offer, it's going to be in a year or whatever. So we'll build and we'll put a space in here to say, okay, new course 21 is coming out. And then it automatically gives us the ability to start to layer in more of the logistics of how our group works. So another issue that we're trying to tackle as far as traditional LMSs put you in this bucket of the section of a course, and we're trying to keep the focus always on the course itself, no matter where you are. So it's the tool of the course. Sections bring with them, logistical cruft of the university, like did they pay and stuff, right? And so a lot of LMSs are still built with this, as this type of design pattern at the forefront that you're put into these very boxy type interfaces that, oh, this is my little section here. And so we try to make it more about the course. And so you see the offerings and sections of this course are actually hooked onto the course itself, not the other way around, as so much of the design patterns are. So what this also is allowing us to do is we can look back through time very easily and build out displays, because it's Drupal, to say, who taught this course over the last several years? How was it taught? What was the syllabus? See what these minute changes are across time. So this is kind of helping us centralize our, our syllabi, if you will, from I guess the last year and a half now, so that we can just very quickly go, oh, how did so-and-so teach this course? It's already come up. We have multiple instructors for the same course content, so that they can kind of talk to each other and have a conversation around these files of, oh, that's how you taught that last year. So we've got that baked in here. That's kind of behind the scenes. There's also this notion of the services that are running. So that's the kind of the circles out on the edge, if you will. So whenever we want to add another one of these to this course, it's basically push a button, and then it goes off and it builds a brand new system for us. So there's a lot of automation going on. This is not something I could do without automation, because I don't want my job to be the Drupal guy that sits there and installs Drupal. So all of that is automated. I can then quickly jump off to this course. Again, we promote this course space in a different way, but it was easy to guess the pattern of the course because it's courses.theuniversityunit / the course in question. So this is Architecture 100. And so you can see that our course content is all responsive in here. We've got a little jump menu, mobile mode to things, and then we can easily paginate through this. So we've done a lot of usability testing associated with this, even to the point of, you notice the navigation gets smaller once you reach what would theoretically be holding the phone this way versus a landscape orientation. We've also done a lot of research review as to the placement of mobile navigation, what makes sense. Most people hold a phone when they do, like this, with their thumb in the lower third quadrant of the device. But there's this terrible thing that we've found through analytics, is that no one comes to our system on these devices. So we've put all of this effort into doing this, and I have the analytics to back it up. So this is PWIC, and I won't take credit for what PWIC does. Basically, I'm promoting PWIC as much as I can because I love it, and it's not related to my system at all. But we've got every site hooked into PWIC, and so it's centralizing our analytics, and so we can look at things like, hey, what devices are people using, and see that yesterday, of 150 or so people that access the site, we only had 11 tablets and 1 smartphone. Now we are seeing increased tablet adoption as well as increased tiny display adoption, I'll say. Things like the MacBook Airs, right, like the 10 or 11 inch size, but that's still a laptop. So it's been great that we put all this work into it, but a lot of times the numbers that come up are like me checking on my Windows phone, or me checking on a Surface. So when I filter out to just be students, we're not seeing, it's actually, I believe 2% of our traffic is actually mobile. Now, that's 2% that's going to be increasing. I mean, there's no denying that that's going to go up every year, and we have HTML5 support built into our videos, so we can do that stuff, but it definitely was hard to justify the investment to me up front to say that we need to really nail into this. What some of our other courses look like, so we've got just a typical outline down the side. Make that a little bigger there. We are just starting to get into that stuff. So Drupal has a pretty robust quiz framework, just called a quiz module. What I kind of view the way that we're building out, sorry, the question was, do we have quizzing and testing capabilities in the system? So by building on Drupal, we're tapping into all those projects that live out there to do that. Drupal is kind of this silent, extremely popular LMS platform. So there's a lot of vendors, particularly in the corporate training area, that like you'll have this website, it'll be great, and then you'll be like, oh, well, you guys built us this website. We really need training for our employees, or we're a trade organization. We really need to make sure that we have the certifications for these different people. So a lot of private LMSs are built in Drupal, and so we're going to start leveraging a lot of those capabilities. But the idea is that we're kind of slowly cherry picking these functionalities out of the LMS and building whole systems that replace that need.
Then would you do a stuff in name quiz dot?
It could be something like that, yeah. Quiz dot whatever address. Another reason for that approach to the design of these is 4 years from now, the technology this is built on will be outdated, which is true of anything, right? It'll be way outdated 4 years from now. Oh my gosh, we even use that. But we can do a staged upgrade of these tool sets. So it might be, we might have a courses 2, or we might have like whatever, because you see weird addresses that universities throw out for different tool sets already, that we can start to migrate portions of this to our newer platforms as we go over time, because these are all kind of, we're just set, I took out my fractal slides. I usually have that this is set up as like a fractal. So we've got a very repeatable pattern that we're kind of managing this potential chaos through sticking to the pattern. So there might be the new blog tool a few years from now, and then that just gets an address that's sticked on. We have ways on the back end, developer ways of migrating that system. All of the things that are stamped out are independent Drupal sites. So from a CMS perspective, these can be peeled off and given to anyone else very easily. So we've been trying to bake a lot of that future proofing into it, knowing that we're going to change. I mean, we'll have systems in here that are non-Drupal. I actually have a tab open right now for one of the newer ones we're going to add into this after I do some more assessment. It's called Data Wrapper. It's a very lightweight, let people produce their own charts and graphs by basically uploading an Excel sheet. And so then we would use that so we get a much more dynamic, interactive, accessible series of charts that can be embedded into course content. So we're kind of following the design methodology all the way through. It's a little bit of, so here's a page that we have some more media on. This media is being provided not by this system, but it's actually being provided by our asset management system. So our asset management system being a completely different system, this is actually in Drupal 6, which at this point is 5 years old. We won an award for it in 2011, so I built it a year before that. So yeah, it's like 4 years old at this point. But we're able to move forward with Drupal 7, or Drupal 8 comes out soon, and we're able to build systems out in that, and this still works. There's nothing wrong with this system. Regardless of what people tell you about the version numbers of CMSs and things, it doesn't matter that much. As far as scope, kind of to get a sense of our footprint, we've got almost 1,900 videos in here, and these are almost entirely produced by the eLearning Institute. We have a dedicated media staff of, I believe, 3 or 4 people, some extremely talented videographers. So some of it is, hey, we've got this DVD, we want clips from it, and then I want to talk over it, traditional lecture style. Others are going on site and recording a play or recording a live performance that's to be captured for the course. So the way that media gets in there is then someone comes in, says, hey, I'd like to select images for whatever this course is, or 100 in this case. So we find our work. We drill down, you'll see we have a series of options, and we're not doing IMG, SRC equals whatever, if you're familiar with the HTML code to do this. We've got this, I won't say it's more readable, but we've got a snippet that when looking down a list of items, it's very obvious that it doesn't belong, right? And so we know that this will be interpreted as our media. We also then use this to embed in the LMS, which that one must not be allowed to. But basically, we've got an additional blank area next to it in which we can have this generate the object code in question, if you will. There we go. So if, for example, we wanted to embed this in our LMS, because we'll do that for testing currently, as we still use that system for testing, but we want to have a video after the question or whatever it is, that will have the video served up from our system, and then we can use this basically iframe. That's effectively what's going on. This is just iframing the content everywhere because, and that might seem a little weird, but that's the way YouTube works and Vimeo and any major video platform, quite frankly, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. You can actually nest iframes up to 3 levels deep on any device and it still works. Yes.
I guess I'm curious on where I'm struggling with. Are you only adopting open source to modify that 2.5% that you talked about? Because I guess I'm struggling with it. Seems like a whole lot of effort to only go open source when there are other products that meet these needs, even if they are separate. So I agree with the separate strategy. To be honest, I'm struggling with it. Is this sort of like an open source sales pitch, or is this a creating a learning environment pitch? Because it seems like you're only going open source, but I'm not exactly sure why.
So the question was, is this an open source sales pitch or a philosophy of design sales pitch? Is that a fair assessment? So this is the philosophy of design I have chosen, which is completely made up of open source projects. So if you were to do something tomorrow in picking off the shelf products, I would still recommend doing it in a way that is targeting and picking certain projects. I'm not going to completely exclude vendors from what we're doing, but we're trying to create an incredibly low-cost ecosystem of tools. So once these are out there, they're free to other people to use. Yes?
Not really on that same question. I guess I was assuming you're kind of operating inside. And by the way, I would agree with your ethics. They line up with ours 100%. Chrome is, starting to really dominate. We're seeing that kind of leadership. Basically, are you working inside of the Penn State World campus? Like, is there an architecture planning that this is the way you want to do it?
So our courses do go out through the World Campus. So you're kind of, sorry, so I have to repeat the question. So the question was, was there a kind of more larger vision of the architecture of this to deploy this way? So at Penn State in general, I'll say that there has been as far as the units and the way that the units have spread out. So we have local units working with the colleges to produce courses that go out through the World Campus. The World Campus also produces courses just exclusively as a standalone, and they go out through the World Campus too. So a lot of Penn State has aligned with this model of building separate systems to meet local needs. Half of Penn State's, probably 6 or 7 learning design shops, either use Drupal or something to do this already. So the Dutton, Anne came in here before, you heard me bantering with her before, but they use Drupal and they use parts of ELMS. They don't use this platform necessarily, but it's a lot of the philosophy of the platform they're still using. As far as it being an intentional design, outside of me going person to person and group to group and us helping each other, I wouldn't say there's necessarily an intentional design to go at this type of a deployment, but all of us started doing it because we saw this, oh, hey, we're gonna build this system and we're gonna put it out there and it's for you and it's great, and then everyone would come to it and there'd always be something that they didn't like, and it's one big deployment. So it's just kind of organically happened. Yes?
What were you using, what were the teachers using prior to, what was the buy-in when you offered a product like this that would quote-unquote solve their needs without having this big package that they're all using?
So the question is, what is the buy-in, or how do we get buy-in from faculty to actually go about using this?
You've got Canvas, you've got Blackboard, you've got Moodle, you have Kayak, you've got so what would make someone look to this? Especially if they're a small shop, and for example, you're just one person doing development, relying on other people, but say you get a staff of 3 or 5, hopefully you got one good person who do PHP, IIS, etc. Yeah, they can install Moodle, but this looks to go for the dominant, essentially. So what's the buy-in to this package versus any of the other?
That's an so the additional question, you let me get to the first one, was this looks daunting compared to something like Moodle. And I won't disagree with you at a high level. It does look daunting. It being all Drupal with what we currently have, it's all upgrades are automated. So I don't know how to put it other than that. I mean, these are, at the end of the day, standalone Drupal sites. I'm not doing anything that couldn't just be done with Drupal and downloading parts of the package that are out there. So any Drupal developer or person that has experience with Drupal should be able to do something with this. So I feel like there's two parts to your question as far as buy-in. One, getting people to use it, and the other, why would I adopt it as a group? So the why would I adopt it as a group is because, as you said, Sakai is dying. I think Moodle is stagnated for the most part, quite frankly. But looking at it under the hood as a PHP developer, I think it's terrible from a code perspective. I'm not talking about the upstream, what happens and faculty usage of it. But I view there's a lot of LMS vendors propping up in the Drupal ecosystem. And so there's a lot of Drupal shops that can be hired. So it starts to get into oh, so-and-so knew a lot about the system. Brian knew a lot about the system, and Brian goes away. There's a huge Drupal ecosystem at Penn State of people that could fill in with what I'm doing. They might not be able to pick it up and just run with it immediately. I mean, that doesn't happen on any project, but they could easily fill in and be like, oh, I see what's going on here. I'm familiar with these modules. I'm familiar with this design pattern. So it's more of, I'm having conversations and having the webmaster of the college actively help build this system just through Mindshare. And hey, did you see this project? And that's been happening all across Penn State with these little pockets of individuals that are all working together to build something that some of them don't even realize they're building, quite frankly. So the other part with the faculty buy-in side, for our faculty, they have to work with us to get courses out through the World Campus. So there's a financial incentive, and this is the platform that we use. It's the Center for Patient Partnerships. Their incentive has been people there hate desire to learn from talking to individuals. And so this provided an alternative that was easier to use from what they were saying. So part of their pilot is how do we onboard faculty and get everybody trained up and everybody working against this platform. And if we can, I'm not just going to say it just is going to work immediately. So it's definitely in its infancy in that way. So some and again, just interrupt me with questions if you want. There's only a few minutes left here, but some of the capabilities of the system that people like is I showed the analytics, I showed kind of the design pattern. We've also got this tool called the Outline Designer, which this is how the content is organized. And so the initial design meeting, if you will, with a faculty member, or some of the faculty actually, they work completely independent of us, they'll sit down and use this tool, because what I noticed is we were sitting there with notepads and kind of making these little lines and these hierarchies and erasing stuff and pointing back up. And so what this lets our staff do is very easily just build out a folder structure, because that's basically what they're doing as far as the learning pattern, whether that's lessons or units or weeks or topics or what have you. I don't care. I just put in place a framework that allows them to go and do their job in this area. It also has additional efficiencies like the ability to duplicate structures. And so what Bill, our lead instructional designer, did to use this system is basically build out one really good lesson is typically the way it works. And they really focus on getting that one lesson structurally corrected. It usually has an introduction, has these series of subtopics, and then ends with quiz directions, linking off to a quiz at the moment, or what have you. And then they'll just click duplicate, and then they will basically take that entire substructure, replicate it, and have a complete working copy next to it. And so for a 15-week course, they'll build one really good week and then go and stamp it out 15 more times just by clicking the button. How this relates in the site then is, if I refresh the page now, by duplicating that, it perfectly maps to what the site hierarchy is. And so all the navigation is just a given. Our text editor that we have, we use, it's called CK Editor. It's a very popular open source text editor. We use a 4.0 version. It's been optimized for accessibility. We also put in place some templates and things so that there's some nice looking templates people can drop in that are all, they use things like CSS3 transitions and things, but more importantly are accessible, because that's really what our concern is. There's also a lot of great accessibility tools built into Drupal, and so this horrendous looking button that I need to style here, If I click check for accessibility, it will actively scan the content, and in this case, compare it against WCAG 2.0 AA. You can set that to whatever you want. The system has basically one checkbox versus the other, support for WCAG 2.0 versus Section 508. And then it's scanning the content, and you'll see, so I have a table down here. So it'll show errors, like things it knows are errors with X's, and I don't have errors, is kind of the goal of our content being out here. But if I click the I for information button, you'll see that I get this, hey, did you know, right? So this starts to be kind of, we were having this issue with, I don't know if Penn State got sued for accessibility issues with online content and things. So we've had this massive training effort of getting everyone to understand core concepts of accessibility. We've been able to bake some of these directly into the page experience and page construction. So someone can create a page and then immediately get at least a decent level of feedback about how accessible that page is. So we're starting to work this into our process, that this may even be a system that just handles the accessibility auditing process, and we have someone dedicated to that. But these are the kinds of things that are basically download the right components and you have them in Drupal. That required zero effort on my part to get, other than knowing the word accessibility, because the project's name is accessibility. And so it's kind of part of why we've gone down this, using this platform, using a non-edtech platform, is whitehouse.gov is powered by Drupal and Drupal 7. So I know it's been vetted for security. There's psu.edu is using Drupal 7. So I know it's vetted for security and scale. So we're tapping into this ecosystem and bringing our connotations of education instead of the system bringing connotations of education to us, which I think is kind of philosophically why a lot of people are unhappy with LMS options, kind of regardless of what they go to. So it's kind of where I just leave off and just kind of random walk through this stuff. But if anybody has any questions, please let me know. All right, have a nice day, everybody.